Dennis, perhaps I can start with you, because there's been a lot this week about the triple lock. Both Labour and the Conservatives sort of slightly pulling their punches a little bit, not entirely committing to the triple lock. So you'll know what it is, but just to explain to people, it is the commitment from the government from 2010, brought in under David Cameron, to say that if every single year the pension will go up, the state pension will go up by either 2.5% or the rate of earnings or the rate of inflation, whichever one is higher. Now, obviously in 2010, Dennis, we thought inflation wasn't going to be at 10.1%, it wasn't going to be at 8.5%. So is it still fair, do you think, Dennis?
Well, I'm not sure about that in terms of inflation in 2010, because what had happened during the last century, between the 80s and 90s, for a very long period, the link between pensions and earnings had been broken by the former Conservative government. And that had led to a huge rise in pensioner poverty. And the reason that it was brought in 2010 was to overcome those ups and downs. So during periods of high inflation or high earnings, it is quite right that the state pension should be protected. And we have to look at the very low level of the state pension as well in this country. It's only, for most people, it's £156 a week at the moment. So an 8.5% rise sounds a lot, but it's only actually £13 in your pocket, which doesn't buy very much these days. So I think we need to get things in perspective here.
It's interesting, actually, when you talk about the small amount of money involved, because there is this idea that the rate in April that it could go up would be 8.5%, but actually when there's this proposal, or certainly it's been mooted, that the bonuses for civil servants, for various people, because of pay settlements, could actually be stripped out and bring it back to 7.8%, presumably, which would save the Treasury apparently £630 million a year. Presumably you don't think that's fair either, Dennis?
We don't think it's fair because it's tinkering and tampering with the triple lock, and it's a tried and trusted formula. And let's remember, it is also a strict manifesto commitment from the Conservatives for the whole of this Parliament. They've already broken that pledge once in 2022 when they suspended the triple lock. And when average earnings were running at around 8% then, we actually got, as state pensioners, 3.1%. So all that money was taken out only 2 years ago. So we certainly don't want any fiddling with the triple lock this year, especially in the run-up to a general election.
We've had quite a big reaction already. If you want to get your voice on the air on this, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me as well on 87222. Poor of Stevenage has been in touch. It says, please stop talking about the pension increase in percentage terms. 10% of very little is very little, and the increases in rent, council tax, food costs and fuel costs absolutely wiped the pathetic increase out. Reem Ibrahim, a lot of these people have paid in sometimes from 15 or 16 years old, and they aren't insulated against the rises in the cost of living, which have been huge. What is your thought on the triple lock and on pensions paid out, Reem, as someone who is I think, in your 20s?
I am in my 20s, yes. I did only just turn 21 this year.
Congratulations.
But age is just a number. And I think that, look, I completely understand, and I really do sympathise with many pensioners who are reliant on the triple lock. But the reality of the situation here is that we're spending an increase of about £11 billion a year on the pension system. And I think it's important to remember that the majority of those pensioners obviously do need that, but also about 27% of pensioners live in millionaire households. So really it's about, what is fair here? Okay, so you could say that all of these people, all these pensioners have paid into a welfare system. Ultimately, the reason why the government have continued to rely on the triple lock is effectively they're buying pensioners' votes. And ultimately, young people don't feel as though they have any kind of prospects in this country economically. We don't build enough homes, so that means that it's really difficult to own your own home. Sort of economics 101, if the supply of housing isn't increased, then of course those prices will remain high. We also have the highest tax burden since the Second World War. So ultimately...
the highest tax burden as a proportion of what the country makes, not quite the highest tax burden. There were very, very high taxes at other points in the 70s, but you're almost there. there, Reem. I can absolutely see where you're coming from, and I think that, I mean, there is undeniably, Dennis, a generational divide here, is there not? There are people who are working very hard who aren't getting 8.5% rises in their earnings, who aren't getting 10.1% rises in their earnings, who are paying for this and feel resentful as a result, Dennis.
Well, I think it's an intergenerational so-called battle, which is being stoked up, and it's got no basis in fact. In fact, average earnings are going up by 8.5%. So a lot of people are getting 8.5%, and a lot of people are getting more than that, especially the very wealthy are getting a lot more than 8.5%. Now, we talk about £11 billion.
Let's talk about the very wealthy. Sorry to interrupt you, Dennis, but let's talk about the very wealthy, because there are 27%, as Reem points out, there are 27% of pensioners who, you know, perhaps own their own property, and of course many properties are worth a lot of money and have gone up a lot in recent years. There are lots of people who are either on paper or actually millionaires. Should the pension be universal?
Yes, it should be universal. There's no question about that at all, because everybody is paid in for their national insurance, and those who earned more actually paying in more in tax and national insurance. So yes, it should be. It should be universal. And you know, there's so many people who may be living in, you know, a house that is probably too big for them, but they've got a very, very low income, and they're rattling around in these big houses because they can't actually go anywhere else, because there's no accessible housing available for them. So you know, they're in a eclectic situation. They can't afford to heat their homes. They probably can't afford to eat properly. But they're sitting on this asset. But there's a very, very small percentage of people in that situation.
Reem, what do you make of what Dennis has said there?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you are an individual who is struggling financially, but you're living in a £1 million home, the logical thing to do would be to sell that home. Ultimately, clearly, this isn't the kind of situation that many people want to be in. But if you are sitting on £1 million asset and doing nothing with it, and then asking for other taxpayers, young, hardworking taxpayers, to foot the bill for your lifestyle, you need to be making those kind of clever financial decisions. You know, if we were to apply Dennis's argument consistently that if you pay into the system, then everybody should get it, and that's why it should be universal, then why shouldn't universal credit, for example, be universal? Are we arguing now for a universal basic income because everybody's paid in, so everybody should get out of it?
Well, I mean, we have numerous benefits are universal. For example, the healthcare system. I mean, that's a whole other debate. But there are, I mean, this is a principle of numerous things in UK society, is it not, Reem?
It is, and I think it's absolutely wrong. I mean, even just taking, for example, the energy price guarantee last year, the energy price guarantee subsidised, again, everybody's energy bills. That meant that people like Rishi Sunak, who are incredibly wealthy, is the Prime Minister of this country and one of the wealthiest Prime Ministers that we've had, and he himself had his energy bill subsidised by the average
Listen, he needs help. He needs, like, you know, that swimming pool won't heat itself.
That swimming pool won't heat itself. But ultimately, you're exactly right, Peter. This is when you're subsidising using taxpayer money for very, very wealthy people. Ultimately, what that does is it means that they will, you know, use that even more. They will increase they won't reduce their energy consumption. The same applies here with pensions. And I do think that Dennis makes an excellent point here. I do think that people are sort of also in the media trying to pit the young and the old against each other. But ultimately, it is unfair. And many pensioners at the moment had enjoyed incredibly low interest rates because the Bank of England had artificially reduced them. Now we're seeing interest rates go up, and ultimately it's a result of an unsound monetary system and a huge and overbearing state.
Dennis, it's interesting because Reem makes some perfectly valid points, doesn't she? I mean, she is 21 years old. She's probably not going to be able to afford a house anytime soon. She's not going to have benefit from the same things that many of the baby boomers, people in their 70s and 80s, have benefited from: low house prices in proportion to income, and many other things as well. And now there are pensioners. There are many pensioners in poverty, and I don't want anybody to have a tough life, but there are many pensioners who have quite a straightforward, relatively easy life with gold-plated pensions, those that are based on final salaries. And there is a generational divide here. There are people in her generation, not actually my generation, I'm nearly 40, who just will not have that same kind of lifestyle when we get to retirement.
Well, I mean, I think we're talking about extreme cases in order to justify cutting...
I don't think it's extreme cases. I know people who were teachers, for example, who have a very good retirement.
Altogether. I mean, you two youngsters, I know that you think you'll never get old, but in fact you will get old. And that's the whole point of the state pension, that everybody, including the younger generations, should have a decent safety net of a state pension when they do reach retirement, whatever age that retirement
ultimately, Dennis, we're paying into the system more than you ever did and your generation ever did. The tax burden, the amount that we're spending on taxes in order to fund effectively an aging population in this country, we are paying more than your generation ever did.
Dennis?
So what? Yeah, well, of course, we've known that there's going to be an aging population in this country for decades, and no preparations have been made to take account of that. I mean, that is not particularly an argument. I don't know what you're actually arguing, though, Reem. Are you saying that everybody should have a reduced state pension, or are you saying, for the large majority, there should actually be an improved state pension, and it's only those very wealthy people who shouldn't get a pension at all?
What are you saying? Well, let's hear from Reem.
Respect for your argument, if that was the case.
Let's hear from Reem. What is your argument, Reem?
Well, what I am saying is that the triple lock on pensions is unfair, and that ultimately it should be a targeted welfare system rather than giving it as a blanket approach to everybody. And actually, I think this is the case with a lot of policy problems in this country. The energy price guarantee, I mean, part of the reason why the markets were so spooked by Liz Truss is because she oversaw some of the largest increases in state expenditure. Ultimately, Dennis, I'll tell you my entire argument is that the state is too big, and that includes the amount that we spend on pensions.
Dennis?
Well, I mean, that's an argument coming from a particular political perspective, which I suspected anyway. The fact is that our state pension is the lowest in the developed world. If anything, it should be increased, not just keep the triple lock, but the basic level should be increased as well. Now, if your guest disagrees with that, because of her political opinions, then that's one argument.
No, that's probably a slightly different argument, Dennis. But yeah, I think a lot of people will have sympathy with that. Listen, both of you, thank you very much. Dennis in particular, thank you for calling me a youngster. And I'm 40 next year. And Reem, actually,
well, that's young.
I'm actually going to a 21st birthday tonight, and believe me, I'm going to feel very, very old indeed. Thank you very much indeed to Reem Ibrahim there, and indeed to Dennis Reed there.